And here I am, Charles Moscowitz, live every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with Michael D. Shaw. He is a health reporter and columnist, has written almost 1,000 columns over about a 10-year period, Mike, right?
A little more than 10 years, but that's close enough.
Oh, okay. And before we get started, I mean, given the fact that it's my channel and all that, I have to do a quick shameless plug in that my new book is
Go for it.
available. And there it is. I know it's a rather odd looking cover, but that's not exactly what I wanted. But there it is in all its glory, available now at Amazon in both softcover and ebook form. I've got my own website, charlesmoscowitz.com, where I've got a blog that I'm doing commentary on daily that relates to the topics at hand. I have an interview scheduled today, actually, right after this interview, Mike, with Alex Newman from the New American Magazine. I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't know the name, but I know the magazine.
Yeah, and he wants to talk about the book. And so, I'm rolling it out, as it were. And, it's great. It's a great time for me to talk about something that, yeah, it's not the usual sorts of things I talk about, but it obviously is political as well. Um, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, that's
And
great.
thank you. And, we are talking here about generally the news as it breaks. Um, I just want to bring up two topics, but you're certainly welcome to bring up what's
Sure.
on your mind. The first is that every morning, one of the first things I tune into is the Drudge Report, which he's gone right into the pocket of the left. I might as well look at the New York Times. I mean, but nevertheless, it is really disheartening to see, the sensational headlines. Trump behind by 20 points. Why don't they just say Trump's behind by 98 points? I don't know. I mean, it's like he's
Well, no one would believe 98, but
I know, but I mean, just the sensationalism of it, and then he goes through the states where he's starting to lose, and that this group's going against him, and that group's going against him, and then he has the most unflattering headlines about some minute comment he might have made, and it is just the most nastiest, most obviously, deliberately vicious and partisan thing. I don't know what happened, and maybe Trump got on his wrong side. I don't know, but the point is that you can't help but look at that and feel a sinking sense. I mean, I don't believe it when I see it, but yet, and I've got Steve Turley coming on with me.
oh, good. He'll talk you out of it.
I just want to get into is that Amy Coney Barrett, in her testimony, I think really has been a great asset to Trump and to the Republicans. I don't know where they found her, but she's tremendous. I mean, she really is just brilliant and really flattening. I mean, even the liberals don't know quite what to do. I mean, they're having an apoplexy, which is great.
Well, there's two defining moments, and I certainly didn't watch all of it. One is when she's asked, what she's doing for notes and references, and she holds up a U.S. Senate pad,
Yeah,
which is blank.
right.
So she is so smart, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
And then, of course, the other side of it was when Mazie Corona asked her if she's ever sexually harassed anyone under the guise of it's supposedly being a checklist item that they have to go through.
she is the lowest. I mean, and also she criticized her for using the term sexual preference. Apparently, that's now it's bigoted and hateful to refer to sexual preference. You have to say sexual orientation.
Well, that must be very recent because
Oh yeah,
in the
I hadn't
last
heard
couple of days, the left used that on a couple of tweets.
No, I'd never heard that before. But even if that were true in some circles, nobody knows that. I mean, people
Right.
aren't saying that to denigrate anyone. I mean, the fact that, and then of course Cory Booker, Spartacus Booker, doubled down on that one, saying yes, sexual preference. This is a big story that she made reference. So, I mean, they got nothing. They really are scratching the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, I was even surprised with that one, but what else are they going to play?
That's right.
She's probably the most qualified person that's been up for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And
No, she's the very best. I mean, she's better than, and she's very media savvy, and, she's easy on the eyes, which doesn't
yeah,
hurt, but she also knows how to parry, and she knows how to do it in a way that really turns the tables. I mean, she's very good at it, and it's pretty cool to watch. I mean, it's at least one moment of inspiration in this whole dreary campaign.
which is probably why he did it, among other reasons.
Oh yeah, I think Trump must have known what he was doing, and it was a great. It augurs well for him. I think it's good to see like a woman step up who's a conservative and a Republican, and it's a good contrast between some of the liberal Dem women's like Nancy Pelosi.
Not to
So
mention the other two Supreme Court justices who are women.
well, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's a win, and I think that it's going to help. I think it might help with women, might help with suburban women. Trump said the other day in a campaign, he basically gave a pitch to suburban women in his own awkward way. Would you please like me? Which right, which sounds
Yes.
silly, but yet I think that could work. They should like him. It's ridiculous. I mean, what does it say that they're just I mean, the entire campaign against Trump is based on one big lie. That's all they have, which is that you have to be against Trump because Trump has something against black men and women, and he's got something against women, and he's got something against minorities. And it's obviously a lie, and I think people are starting to know that.
Yeah, I think what happens, and they use this term suburban women.
Right.
I think, and I'll just have to relate an experience
Mm-hmm.
that, all right, the person I'm talking about, I won't mention them, older, and was talking to us about everything good about Trump. Lowered the taxes, did everything he said. She's of the Jewish persuasion, and mentioned that the embassy was moved and so on and so forth. However, I'm not voting for him. And it was a series of about 10 points. And you'd think, therefore, I am voting for him. Okay. So I said, well, wait a minute. You just mentioned all these good things. Well, I know, but I don't like either of them. And I'm not voting for him. And then on the drive home, I said to my wife, I figured out what it was, and I wasn't going to press it. It's the abortion issue. And there seems to be a cadre of middle-aged to older women that perhaps wish they could have had an abortion. I mean, I don't get that part of it, how this is an issue for someone who's 30 years past childbearing age. But I think that the suburban women thing, that might be a dog whistle that's connected in that.
Oh yeah, no, I think
you're going to have
right.
to explain to me why that seems to be part of this, but
it's a big one. No, it is. I mean, and the idea that the Supreme Court might overturn Roe versus Wade, which everybody on all sides recognizes was a very faulty decision constitutionally, and is vulnerable for that reason. And that ever since that decision was made, it has warped the entire judicial system because everybody's twisted and bent out of shape over how to circle the wagons around it. I'd point out that if that did happen and it was overturned, nothing would really change.
It goes back to the states.
Massachusetts, the very next day, would pass a law by the legislature would get together and pass a law that would essentially be the same, probably worse, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, but at least, I mean, I don't think that there's any state in the union that would not do that. And if there were states in the union that decided not to, that's how our system works. That's how we have a democratic republic in this country, and we elect representatives to present our will within a constitutional framework. So if the people of a state want to have abortion rights, then they can elect representatives who support that position, and they can craft legislation to have that. If they don't, then they don't. That's how the system works, you know. If you want to, if you have a state that does not allow it, and you want them to, you work to get people elected, or you try to work to get the state to do something like maybe provide monies so that a woman who wants an abortion in that state can be transported to another state, or there are means where it can be addressed. I mean, it doesn't have to be a national overarching law, and that's which is not constitutional. So, you know, either we're going to have a constitutional system or we're not. And yeah, you know, I understand the position of legal abortion. I mean, this has been impressed upon me by members of my family, very close members, let's put it that way. And I get the fact that you know the federal government or the state government really should not be forcing a woman to carry a pregnancy in the at least not in the early stages. I get that. But I think that the remedy to that is one that should be decided by the sovereign people in a given state, not by fiat, not by a federal agency that's not elected.
Well, it turns out that that, as you know, Supreme Court decisions are overturned. Plessy versus Ferguson was overturned by Brown versus the board. But here's the point: in legal theory, and no one ever reads the cases, but I actually do on certain occasions. The legal reasoning in Brown versus the board was absurdly stupid. It was a just cause, obviously. The reasoning was dumb, based largely on the fact, you can read it if you don't believe me, that some Scandinavian psychologist discovered.
Myrdal, right?
Yeah. Well, then you know the story.
Right.
That the black kids were played with white dolls, and they had low self-esteem, and so on. Okay, notwithstanding, no one has ever, one time, on any side, argued that Brown versus the board be overturned. But yet, Roe v. Wade, people have been arguing about it since the day it was published.
You know, this is exactly a point that Amy Coney Barrett brought up when she was asked about Roe versus Wade. You know, she said that she supports settled law that, and she mentioned Brown versus the board. She mentioned one other case about Marbury versus Madison.
Oh, right.
That these things were controversial in their day. They were, you know, there was some wringing of hands, but yet no one is questioning it today. It has become part of the fabric. But Roe versus Wade is not that.
Yeah.
You know, it's still something that is causing a great deal of consternation. So you really can't describe it as settled law. And of course, she's absolutely right. And that might be driving the pro-abortion crowd berserk. That could, I don't know if that's going to hurt or help. I think it's certainly going to help the base for President Trump, because Trump promised to put in pro-life judges. And, you know, and maybe that's enough. The question is, how much is it going to turn off the pro-choice side? You know, and how pro-choice are they? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's, you know, it's obviously, this is a very profound question. Questions of life and death, whether they involve abortion or the death penalty or euthanasia, these are profound questions that transcend left and right. They are just, every society has to grapple with these sorts of questions. What is the definition of life? So, you know, it's hard to know how that's going to fly.
Well, I mean, I think there's hardcore people on both sides, but on the pro-choice side, this has become greater than the actual issue. This is some sort of point that's probably even greater in comparison to the gun people. That they regard this as some sort of civil right, and it's a passionate issue, but they've already spoken. You know, they're all Democrats. You know, they're all going to vote for Biden. So
Well, we don't. I mean, you're getting into, of course, the actual election at this point, and
Right.
um, James O'Keefe, you know who he is from
Oh, yeah.
Operation Veritas.
Right.
He's got some great underground videos now. They're not being covered, of course, by the mainstream media, the same media that pushed the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump is spying for the Russians. I mean, they're not going to help any. They're going to do anything they can to stop Trump. So they're not going to expose these videos. But his people, underground reporters, have on tape in Colorado activists who are saying, yes, we're committing voter fraud. Yeah, we're going to vote for Biden 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Our cat's voting for Biden. Everyone's voting for Biden. And, because we believe that Trump has something against black people, and therefore we're morally justified to do whatever we need to do to have him removed from office. Now, I think that is a radical group that's doing that, like Antifa or BLM and those types. But I think that the media, the mainstream media, the same people that pushed the conspiracy theory about Trump being spying for Russians, they're going to be at least partially in bed with those people. I mean, they're going to be serving as the same tools for that they served for the people inside the government, like the Comeys and the Brennans, who wanted to push this conspiracy theory against Trump and who knew they could depend on the media to help. So that's a worry. And I think that that's something that I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume is going on. And it's probably going on at least in the battleground states, if not in all the states. And that's what really the only way I think that they can win. And they think they're going to win that way. And they very well may win that way. I mean, we're talking possibly hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of fake votes.
I'm not sure how easy it is to do it in those quantities. I can see, the classic examples like LBJ in Texas many years ago with its
Yeah.
congressional seat, where they fooled around with certain precincts. But on the massive scale that you're talking about, I believe would require such an organized conspiracy. And I don't
Well,
have.
let's not forget that elections are local, right? I mean,
Right.
they are by the precinct. You don't need to. I mean, remember in 2012, Barack Obama got like a 98% of the vote in certain precincts, like
Right.
in Detroit or in St. Louis. I think in one or two cases, he actually got 102% of the vote.
Right. Right. But
Those are machine areas. Those are corrupt. They're still there. Nothing had happened. I mean, in 2016, when Jill Stein wanted to recount in Michigan, they started to recount and they discovered such levels of fraud in Detroit that they stopped the recount because it would have exposed it. They want to keep it there
Yeah.
for another day. So that's still there. They're still going to do that. They're doing it now. They've got in New York State, they mailed out 30,000 phony ballots, and now they've said that those ballots are not valid. So they're going to mail out another 30,000. People are going to send back too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know somebody who got one of those ballots, an ultra liberal person, by the way. And,
right.
and they,
is that person going to send in multiple ballots?
I don't know, but I would not at all be surprised. We're talking about people who are just, they crawl over broken glass to stop Trump. They feel that it's a moral imperative. They have this is like a radical moral, high Dutch moral movement. I mean, they're holier than thou. Anything and everything. It's it's the approach of Saul Alinsky back Rules for Radicals. Anything
Yeah.
to do, anything and everything is permissible if the cause is right and if the results are right. And that can include anything.
Well,
right?
how did, okay, but now these specific people. How did they form that opinion of
They
Trump?
formed it at a very early age because they're radical left culturally and to a certain extent politically. And they just know that Trump is an enemy of the left, and he is.
Yeah.
And so therefore he's the enemy. He's the enemy of the masses. He's the enemy of the state. And they feel perfectly justified to do anything and everything to stop him. In fact, they do it with joy. They'll send that in with a sense of righteousness. we're doing good, right?
Well, how many people are there like that though, where this politics consumes their
Well,
life?
there's enough of them, and they can do great damage, and they can do.
But they've always been around.
Yeah, but at this point, they are so rabid and so extreme, and it's getting so close. And the media is fanning the flames by talking about Trump behind by 10 points, 15 points, 50 points. I mean, that they're breathing fire. I mean, these people are just, they can sense and taste victory. This is a revolutionary group. And they're going to be backed up, by the way, by what obviously is being formed now. And James O'Keefe, again, has shown evidence of this in his underground interviews. And that is that if on election day Trump does win, they're going to launch a violent revolution in the United States. It's going to be like, Europe in 1848 in the big cities. They're going to push like a Bolshevik style revolution. I'm not kidding.
And you don't think there's going to be any pushback against?
Oh yeah, no, they're not going to get away with it. But the point is that it's in the works, and it's going to be ugly. It's going to be. I think Boston isn't going to be hit by it as much, because even though Boston has a reputation for being very left, it's not as much as people think. This is a law and order city.
Yeah,
it's a tough city. We've had a couple of protests. They've been peaceful mostly. There was one couple of ugly instances, but nothing big. I mean, certainly not Portland. I think we had one Christopher Columbus statue beheaded, and that's about all. But we're going to see huge, like what can only be described as a communist style insurrection. And I think that if Trump wins, I think that the federal government will completely crush it. But
yeah,
we can just, I think we can almost assume that's going to happen.
Well, that's fairly depressing, but I can't totally disagree.
Right.
Other than I don't know if it's going to be as widespread as you're implying, but.
What do you think is? I mean, what do you make of these polls that show Trump behind him?
All right. Well, when you're going to talk to Steve Turley,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to mention that there are some. Well, he's going to mention some fundamental flaws in those polls, including the fact that in this famous Rasmussen poll, it was analyzed by a guy named Steve Deace, who discovered in the fine print that they made this wonderful assumption that Trump is only going to recover 76% of Republican votes. Never mind that he got over 90% in the primaries.
What was that based on?
Well, that's the point. They just pulled it out of the air. I mean,
Okay.
it's as a sidebar on this, people talk about listen to the science. Well, how's the science formed? Okay, I can take a poll and I can make certain assumptions, and I can absolutely faithfully report the results of that poll based on those assumptions, but it's very flawed. Then you can go to Nate Silver, is again predicting a victory, in this case for Biden. And the problem with Silver was that he never really, there was no mea culpa when he got it all wrong in 2016. The
That's
most
right.
he ever said was, well, it was within experimental error. Well, wait a minute, time out. What is the experimental error when you can say that Hillary, I believe, had a 67% chance of winning? That's not experimental error, 67 versus 33. So, there's another guy, though, that has some good points. This is the Trafalgar poll organization,
Right.
Robert Cahaly, who was right in 2016. And he's one of these disruptors of the polling industry because he will readily admit that the old models don't work. And he didn't say this, but he retweeted a guy who said, it seems the only purpose of Nate Silver is to complain when people disagree with him. I had the tweet printed somewhere, but there's other people. There's a guy named Bob Kudla, who's some genius trading guy who Actually, Turley has had on the show a couple of times, and he's saying Trump in a landslide. So we could talk about polls. I think the problem you get into, what is Trafalgar calls it something like, he used the term social desirability. You know, you have a Trump banner on your microphone, but I'm not sure if you have one in your car because
good point.
okay, so
no, I mean, I can't because you're getting to a very basic point, which is that people are afraid to come out and support Trump because
all right, now why were they afraid to support
because they
Trump
could
in
get mugged.
2016?
They could get, their career could be damaged.
Right.
Their professional reputation could be hurt. They could lose positions. I mean, it's a very dangerous. The people that are anti-Trump, that's ugly. I mean, that's so. Yeah, I mean, you're getting
It's
to the
worse
point.
now
Oh yeah,
than it was in
people get shot.
2016.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was shot dead in Las
Yeah.
Vegas, I think.
Okay, well, here's the point. When this social desirability issue occurred in 2016, it was mostly because Hillary Clinton called them deplorables. So that was picked up by the media. But now they're racists and they're homophobes and they're bigots,
white supremacy,
and so on. So I would say that there's a much bigger factor where people aren't going to speak the truth.
Right.
And this was the old, you've heard it, the Bradley effect in the California gubernatorial race, where nobody wanted to say they weren't voting for Bradley because he's black. So he was supposed to win. Of course, he lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I guess, another side of social desirability. People don't tell the truth.
I think it's true.
And it's discussed before. Even if they did, there's what we have, selection bias. Would you answer a poll? I mean, the mere fact that someone answers a poll, wants to be in a focus group, wants to be I think what they call survey talker, that's not the normal person. Most people have lied.
Right. In fact, they've already exposed, I think there was at least one of these focus groups, they were all partisan Biden people.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so riddled with garbage. And there's just something about being in the mainstream that it doesn't matter how screwed up you are, you just keep going. He's, and in fact, there's a guy that I am good friends with, who's a pretty sharp guy, high up in a government agency. And he sends me all this Nate Silver stuff. Oh yeah, Nate Silver's the greatest and respected. And I'm thinking, well, didn't he get it wrong last time?
Right, exactly. No, I think you're onto something. And also there's this, kind of the social bias element. People do keep it private.
Yeah.
And there's just, I think that the Trump people have called them suppression polls, in that they keep putting up big banner headlines. Trump down by 15, Trump down by 50.
So why bother voting?
Yeah, I mean, it has a demoralizing effect. I mean, I feel demoralized when I see that. I'm like, oh no, I just find my I start to sink into the chair when I see that. So, if it has that effect on me, I mean, I think it would have a big effect on average people who are not necessarily as in tune with what's really going on.
Yeah, but remember that most people aren't political junkies.
Right.
And don't quite, keep checking these websites 3 times an hour, see what's
exactly.
What's going on.
I mean, I'm like losing sleep over this thing. Most people don't even, they're probably, not even going to decide until like a week before. Meanwhile, Biden is under federal investigation because of the connections with Hunter Biden and Burisma.
And was proved to have lied about that.
That's right. Proved to have lied when he said that he had never discussed business with his son, which of course is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And now it's in writing, and you've got the notes from, I think, Brennan, and being released due to the Freedom of Information requests from Judicial Watch. Very good group, by the way. Tom Fitton doing a great job. And you've got the connection between Hillary and the Russia conspiracy theory, and you've got a lot of other stuff coming out. I don't think that my main concern is that the mainstream media does not cover this at all. and that 99% of people aren't going to know about this. You and I know because we pay very close attention, but most
Right.
people don't know. You've got the big social media entities censoring, people like me and you, and even people like Breitbart, and that's going to get real tight as we get closer. I mean, there's going to be, in fact, I think they're talking about no political talk at all 10 days before the election. I mean, what is this? The Taliban? I mean, what kind of a nonsense is that?
Yeah. Well, I think after this election, especially if Trump wins, you're going to see some changes in these institutions. I'm not just talking about the media.
Oh, yeah.
You look at the NBA and China. I mean, this stuff has been exposed. They can't keep this up. They can't laugh away the fact that it was for their NBA finals was the lowest TV ratings ever, ever.
No, they can't sustain that. I mean, they're losing their cultural cachet. I mean, people aren't tuning in. They can't, that's all they have. And if they lose that, then they're nothing. They'll might as well go back to playing, in a high school, baseball field. I mean, it's just, it'll be over. Where will the advertisers go? Although they don't seem to care.
Well, they will. But even, on that topic, answer me this question. I don't know anybody who watches television in real time except for news and sporting events. So
That's true.
why are advertisers paying for ads on all the normal network shows? Okay. And the answer is because that's what you do. All right. If you're manufacturing toothpaste, you're going to buy TV time.
And it's probably all purchased a year in advance. And they just have these big agencies who have media buyers.
Yeah.
They don't even pay attention to it. And the media buyers at the big agencies place the ads just based on automatic metrics. They don't really look at anything. It's all done. It's almost like an automatic behemoth that just keeps rolling along.
That's right. But who's watching the commercials?
No, I mean, if you have with replay, you've got nobody. I mean, you fast forward. That's what I do.
Yeah. I mean, you record the show and watch it at a later time. And maybe you stop and watch all the commercials, but most people don't, they'll
Exactly. I don't either. Now, God forbid, I mean, Trump does lose. And again, I hate to even think about this. It makes me sick to my stomach, but if that happens, I really think that it's going to be very, very bad for people like you and I, like me. And, I think people are going to go to jail, and I think people are going to be censored, and people are going to be prosecuted. And certainly all of the rotten corruption of the Russia gate and the spy gate, all that stuff is going to go down the river. We'll never, ever, ever hear about that. It'll be like Kennedy assassination. It'll be forever destroyed and classified. And this rotten outfit that had started all that conspiracy and that had been engaged in that kind of corruption, they're the ones that are going to take over, and they're going to take over with a vengeance. And it is going to be a very, very troubling and very dangerous time for people who in any way have questioned the regime. I think that probably Donald Trump himself could be facing prison time. His family could be facing prison time. These people are going to go after them with pitchforks. They're going to burn them down. It's going to be like the French Revolution did to Louis the XVI and Marie Antoinette. It's going to be guillotines.
Well, I hope it's not quite that bad, but
I think it is going to be. I'm not kidding.
Look what happened to Robespierre.
It'll look a little different, but it's going to be the same.
Well, but how many years did that last before Robespierre got caught up in his own guillotine?
Yeah, well, yeah, but the point is we could go through some pretty tough periods in between.
Yeah.
There was the reign of terror went on for, I think, a year and a half. It was 1793, 1794. And then, Robespierre eventually faced his own guillotine. And then you had Napoleon. But, that's never happened in this country. We've never had that kind of radical element here. I mean, George Washington had to deal with that. He was actually president at that time. And he understood it. This was a radical movement that really never took root on the American shore. America, our entire raison d'etre, our entire political philosophy rejects that, but yet here it is.
Well, okay, but don't you think it's being overly pumped up that it isn't as deep as they would like you to believe? Let's assume worst case scenario. All right, Trump loses. Okay, it's then becomes a day of the long knives. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of public support for that somehow.
That's true. I mean, I still think they're going to do it, though. I don't think they care.
Well, they're going to try to do it.
And they do control the high ground. They're the top 1% wealthiest. They control the social networks. They can unplug anyone they want. They control the top levels of the big businesses that are paying for the NFL and, all of that. They control the cultural high ground.
But it still comes down to basic economics. Even
ultimately,
even the NBA decided that there weren't going to be SJWs next year. Joel Silver came out, well, we're not going to do this anymore. And people are going to get hit in the pocketbook, and it's going to change. And maybe the world isn't what you see on Twitter. I mean, you really have to balance this. My wife subscribes to Saveur magazine, which is a food thing, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was an offhanded comment about some sort of Mexican food where the woman that wrote it said, well, now in these post-Goya days, I mean, where the hell did that come from? You wouldn't believe it. I've never seen anything like that you would inject politics into a food recipe.
Oh, it's everywhere.
And, in her sense, get away with it or even be justified. But even more than that, just because somebody supports a politician you don't like, I've never heard of such a thing.
I know. Can you imagine that? There he is. He made some mild comments supporting President Trump, the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And you've got, AOC and them, they want to boycott. I mean, they're going to put
somebody. But here's the point. But it failed. It failed.
That's right. That's true.
Sales went through the roof.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the harbinger.
Same thing with what's his face from the pillow, My Pillow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, and companies are afraid to come out. That's true too. I mean, they don't want usually corporations don't want to get into politics publicly because they want to piss off people. I mean, they want to make the product available to everybody. So, that could be a point. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the other thing, I mean, but yet that combined with them coming to power in the middle of the pandemic, when you have economic dislocation, you've got companies that are on the verge of bankruptcy, some of whom are now withdrawing from the economy altogether. Like, for example, the Regal Cinemas have closed, I think 60 cinemas across the United States. The airline industry is in big trouble. You've got restaurants are in big trouble. It could take a decade for them to recover. You've got a new government coming in that's going to raise taxes and is going to mandate masks and start to kind of reinstitute some of the bad old stuff that had been there. Pack the Supreme Court. Pack the Senate by
but how's that going to go over with we the people? You could talk about all.
They don't care.
Not you, but I mean, people outside could talk about all this. But what happens when you actually do it? I'd like to believe that the world is bigger than what you see in these elite urban areas or read on Twitter. And I think at the end of the day, the economics are going to rule it. It's one thing to try to play censorship when you're not getting hit in the pocketbook. But even Google and Facebook don't have infinite resources. And
but they have monopoly powers.
Until someone else comes along.
Which no one else is anywhere.
Well, I mean, look at whatever happened to MySpace. All right. Facebook was perceived as a more convenient platform. Google came out of nowhere when there were 3 or 4 search engines that were already established. So
I understand that, but right now, as it stands, they control about 98, 99% of the
yes,
market. I don't think anyone has had that big a footprint up until
no,
now. So, I mean, you've got some minor players. I mean, YouTube, Vimeo, maybe Gab. They've got,
yeah,
they're like less than a tiny fraction of
right.
1% of the market. I mean, Parler is taking on Twitter, and they're making gains, but they're still tiny compared to Twitter. I'm just saying that they have such a position of authority in that market that they can do it. And yeah, look, I'm not going to compare, or maybe I am going to compare the election, God forbid, of Biden to the election of Adolf Hitler, but both of whom were big radical socialists. But Hitler was not elected by a majority, and
Yeah.
and his policies were not supported by the majority of Germans. They wanted some kind of a return to normalcy, as the saying goes, and they were tired of the gridlock in Berlin. And Hitler promised to bring clarity to government. But the thing is that within 3 weeks or a month of his taking office, suddenly there's a national emergency, the Reichstag fire, started by some communist, allegedly.
Yeah.
Now, there's ever since then, I think there's been some, if not a lot of evidence to show that this had been an inside job and that it was sort of an incident
False
that
flag.
exactly. But the point is that in the guise of that emergency, he stepped up and he suspended the German constitution. He put in articles, I forget the Article 36 or something like that, which gave emergency temporary powers to the chancellor. Then, there were some other events. I mean, von Hindenburg died and then he became president. And
Right.
he was able to then launch the Night of the Thousand Knives, in which every enemy he ever had was murdered, including his own high school teacher, in back in Austria. Um, I'm just saying that, I'm not saying this would be a similar situation, but given the situation we're in now, the precarious situation with the pandemic and with states using extraordinary and I would suggest unconstitutional powers to deal with that emergency. And given the fact that the economy might be in big trouble, it could be in worse trouble than we know. Uh, China is rattling the sword. I mean, there's other things going on in the world. I mean, I think that a Biden or whoever is actually in control could make the grounds for a declaration of emergency like that, and maybe triggers. There could be some incident or something. Maybe they'll kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. I don't know, whatever. There'll be something that could trigger it, and all of a sudden, the president is going to step up and it says, "We are in a war. This is an emergency. I have to take direct action." And it could be a similar scenario.
Well, I don't know. I mean, even during the Civil War, Lincoln did several autocratic things,
Right.
but never what you're describing. And it doesn't seem, maybe I'm naive here, it doesn't seem like the American character would put up with this. I mean, remember, before Hitler came to power, Germany was not in particularly good shape. There was
Right. Well, there was, in a way, it was similar. You had radical communists and
Yeah.
Nazis battling it out on the street.
right.
You had gun confiscation. You had anarchy. That could be ramped up in this country with a snap of a snap of a finger.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, Hitler was a charismatic figure.
That's
I
true.
would have to argue that if you wanted to go that route, who on the Democratic side could inspire such devotion?
That's true. That's true.
I mean, Biden gets 6 people to show up to his rallies.
Right. He doesn't have any. There's nothing. There's no energy there. There's no. He doesn't. Nobody likes him. I mean, that's true. I mean, he's not. He hides behind the mask. I think not just because of the virus, but because he doesn't want anyone to. He doesn't want anyone to see his face. I mean, it's terrible. He just doesn't. It's not a good look.
So I think that you're raising some interesting scenarios.
Right.
I don't think the ingredients are the same. I would say that you would be more on the mark if the candidate were as charismatic as Adolf Hitler and had such skilled propaganda people.
Well, I could tell you
behind it.
one candidate that is similar, and again, I'm not saying that this person is a Nazi, and I'm not
Right.
saying they're anti-Semitic, not necessarily, and that would be none other than Barack Obama, right? I mean, Barack Obama had that kind of cult following. It was very similar. I don't think this country ever saw a presidential candidate have that kind of, you know, loyal following where women were fainting at his rallies.
Right, but it wasn't the same sort of thing where I believe where they go out and kill for him and have a
no,
Christmas.
but I think that if Biden wins, I think Barack Obama is going to be basically moving back into the White House, not maybe literally,
Yeah.
but you know, he.
That's interesting. Yeah.
We all know that he was at this point, because of declassified information from Judicial Watch, that he planted people in the administration or in the bureaucracy that would try to dissemble and disrupt the Trump administration.
Right.
Some of those same people, and I'm going to mention only one name, but we could mention others, and that is Colonel Vindman.
Yeah.
Came out of the woodwork during the so-called, the perfect phone call hearings, and they began to testify, putting on military garb and talking about the fact that they didn't like President Trump's foreign policy, which is, since when do you get impeached for that?
Yeah.
They could have, if they didn't like it, they could have resigned and written a book instead of stayed quietly in the White House. He actually worked in the White House.
Yes.
Under the national security advising. And there are a lot of those who are there as plants, and they were put in place in the final months of the Obama administration after Trump had won.
But at the risk of
they're like time bombs.
At the risk of being overly dramatic, to put in people like that who are doing little nefarious deeds on the side does not compare to going out and killing all your enemies. So
no, but I'm only bringing that up because it seems that Obama left in place a kind of a shadow government and then
yeah, I would agree.
And then he went back to his house in Talarama, where he had like a situation room where he would actually kind of try to run a shadow government. I mean, apparently,
Yeah.
according to released testimony. And,
But it was sort of, if I can use this word, it was kind of a fey sort of thing compared to actively out there kicking butt.
But that's not Obama's style, though. I mean, he's always, when he was president, he was a real kind of like control freak in that he would spy on everyone, including his friends. He would have bugs on people's, it wasn't like with Nixon with the bugging, but it was, using modern electronic surveillance. I mean, Angela Merkel, he was spying on her.
Yeah.
She was so angry that she brought it up to the UN. He was spying, and that's a friend.
Yeah.
So because he wanted to know what people were doing, what people were saying. I mean, the guy has, I get the sense that that's the biggest flaw in his personality. He wants to control the atmosphere, but he does it quietly.
Well, but don't
he's not out there banging the table,
That's more of a passive aggressive type of approach, rather than taking bold direct action. So
but the thing is, I don't think he ever really conceded that he was out of office. I mean,
yeah.
And by the way, I mean, this is typical. I mean, it's a small example, but in the state of Georgia, you've got what's her name? Stacey Abrams. She never conceded that she had lost that election. She continues to walk around like she's the governor, that it was stolen from her.
Right.
And she's never acknowledged that she lost. And she just moves on like nothing happened. I mean, she feels, it's delusional, but this is how they are. It's an example. I mean, I'm not saying they all are, but.
Well, I think we played that out to quite a degree.
I guess. I mean, I'll leave it at that. Again, we're speculating here. I mean, it's just we observe ongoing events, and we are concerned. I'm concerned about
Right.
it. That's all. I mean, I'm not
Right. Well,
saying
then
that
on the
I
on
can't
the
predict. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it is something of concern. That's my main point here.
yeah, well, I think it is. Uh, and you gave some dire examples. Uh, when they bring out a guillotine on Capitol Hill, I'll agree
Well,
with you.
they already put one in front of Jeff Bezos's house.
Yeah. In terms of COVID, you may have heard of this so-called Great Barrington Declaration, where a bunch of epidemiologists signed this thing essentially saying that lockdowns don't work, and you have to have a term which disappeared over the last year, precision medicine. They don't use that term, but that's what it is.
Mhm.
Where no, you take specific care of something. If I'm your doctor and I'm treating you, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter except for reference what the blood level of this what the average, because you might be different. Your mileage may vary. So no, you don't quarantine the healthy and so on and so forth. And I think it was signed by over 1,000 like-minded epidemiologists. Then it came out that an official of the World Health Organization also said that lockdowns are bad, but he was immediately contradicted by China boy Tedros, who now it's just painfully obvious is just doing the bidding of China.
So China has an interest in keeping the thing going. Is that it?
Well,
The
right.
lockdowns. I mean, it's hurting because it's hurting the economies of the rest of the world, and they feel that it's putting that. And they're not having lockdowns. I mean, there was just a puff piece about China on 60 Minutes where they said, "Oh, everything is great, everything's normal."
Right.
They show people out at restaurants. Everything is, and they have practically no virus.
Yeah, but there's still people that hold that it's not an engineered virus, which it obviously is. We don't know. If you want to talk about things you get worried about, we don't know if people are seeding new strains of this thing, just walking in crowded areas, and you have no idea.
No, I mean, I think that was it you, Michael, who talked about this new virus in Kazakhstan. I think it was you who mentioned it.
Yeah.
That's even worse than COVID.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff doesn't occur by itself typically.
Yeah.
I think people are messing with it. It's being weaponized. Because sure, there are cases where some otherwise healthy 20-year-old dies of this. But there's too many weird characteristics of this disease to come to any other conclusion that it's not engineered. And
yeah, absolutely.
well, I mean, and I've been following this, and of course, the big argument, you see, if you're smart, the big argument is, well, it can't be engineered because there's errors in the spike protein. The spike protein is the exterior protein that connects to the cell. And the argument is, no, there's actually some problems with the way this protein is constructed. So therefore, it can't be bioengineered because it's not perfect. Well, how about bioengineering it on purpose so it isn't perfect?
That's
did you ever
right.
think of that? And
yeah, it's a very unpleasant thought, but yeah, I mean, it's been out there by a lot of very people who understand this. What do you think of the fact that apparently President Trump has recovered?
well, he was given some pretty strong antivirals, which now they actually technically weren't yet released by the FDA. So he became a guinea pig, and it worked for him. So I think that's great. I mean, it's another good therapy.
Yeah.
There seem to be some setbacks for a couple of vaccines. Both Lilly and Johnson & Johnson had to stop their clinical trial there was some illness, which I don't think was specified in some of the people in the trial, which is really an abundance of caution. I mean, let's put it this way. When they were doing the trials for the polio vaccine, they wouldn't have stopped for something like this. So it's a whole different focus.
Right. Okay. But the Regeneron seemed to have worked for Trump,
Yeah,
along with the remdesivir and I think one other thing. And now he says that that's going to be made available to hospitals around the country, particularly for elderly people. I think that the U.S. Army is involved in distributing it and
that's
making
right.
sure it gets to the hospitals. It's going to
Right.
be free. Uh, I think that those things are helpful. And I think that since we're on the subject, the rhetoric coming out of the left on blaming Trump. I mean, I'm watching people like former Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe
Oh, boy.
on Twitter. Horrible. Trump is guilty of genocide and he's guilty of the Holocaust, and he's worse than Hitler, and he's this. I don't think that's flying. I think that the fact of the matter is that people understand, and I think Trump is absolutely right, that he actually dodged a major bullet for this country by reducing immigration when he did. He didn't let people pour into the country at that time, and back in late January, and that we would have otherwise possibly had millions of deaths. I think that's probably true.
Yeah, well, you knew that no matter what happened, he was going to be blamed for it. And
Right. And I also recall at that time, like in April, people on the left, including people I know, were saying, well, he has to nationalize the response. We have to suspend the Constitution, bring in the army, do like
they're always so willing to do that.
oh yeah, complete total national lockdown. When what he did was within the constitutional structure, he allowed the states to present their own policies based on their own particular needs, and he offered federal assistance, but not direct federal control. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how it should be done. That's how it should be done on the state level too. You isolate the areas where there are problems, and you leave the rest of the area alone. So I think that people understand that. I hope they do. That the left is really, again, it's as big a lie as that Trump has something against black people. I mean, and I think that's not flying. I think black people aren't buying it. I
No.
think that Hispanics, Trump is picking up support and that could help him in places like Florida and Texas and other states. He's even getting Jewish support, believe it or not. I mean, in New
Really?
York City, well, New York City, the Orthodox people think, oh, well, who are they? It's just a fringe group. But we're talking, 20, 30,000 people. I mean, they're very loyal to their rebbes. And if their rebbe goes like this, it's like the mafia, They're all going to vote a certain way. And they're overwhelmingly supportive of Trump. And they had a huge rally in New York City where thousands of men were out dancing and, waving Trump flags. I think that could make a difference. I would point out, as just a little historic precedent, that in 1992, Bill Clinton was able to get the New York primary because of that vote, because he promised the Rebbes that he would put a kosher kitchen in the White House, and they said okay, and they endorsed him. And that was he never did it, but that's they vote like a block. I mean, they really do. I mean, it's like a very.
Do they have any influence on the conservative and reform?
No, they hate them, and then they're radically left. But the point is that there's enough of them, and it's a growing population, and they have really come out strongly for Trump. And we're talking about a lot. They could change the structure of New York.
Okay, let's delve into from that social desirability thing for a moment. Okay, yeah. How do you know that there aren't some people sitting in a reform or conservative temple that secretly?
Okay, there are.
Yeah,
I think,
okay.
But they will never speak up because the hatred.
No.
I can speak to that personally. I mean, no, they're never. I've had people, because I'm openly conservative and pro-Trump, and
how many temples have you been thrown out?
I've been thrown out of one, but
Wow.
and the other one I'm still there. But people have spoken to me, out of this Soto vote. Chuck, we're with you, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And Chuck, why don't you go up and challenge them? I'm like, the hell with that. I'm not going to put my neck out. You do it. I mean, the thing is that, I think they're out there. I think that they probably don't even tell their own spouse that they're out there, but they're going
Right,
to,
you're right.
but when they show up at that polling place, they're going to vote with a vengeance. People vote like that. It's like, there's like F you, they're going to, I think that Trump is going to capture that vote. I mean, the usual establishment left, that I don't even want to waste any time talking to them, but there's enough people. I mean, I think that Trump could peel off even 1%, 2%, even 0.5% of that vote, and that could make a big difference. And I think you get the same thing happening in the Black community. They're not all marching along like Biden said. They all think alike, which is really racist comments.
That was smart.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at his past and the stuff that he's supported, and
Well, he was a segregationist in Delaware when he first started.
And he was also the Biden crime bill is something that Trump is taking steps to undo. I think Black people understand that, and I think that there's growing numbers. You've got what's her name, Stacey. You know who I mean?
Washington.
No, yeah, the talk show host.
Yeah.
She's leading the Blaxit movement.
Stacey Owens, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Stacey Owens, brilliant woman, amazing.
Oh, no, Candace Owens.
Candace Owens, thank you. Great speaker.
Stacey Washington is another one, but you're
okay.
thinking of Candace Owens. Yeah.
Candace Owens leading the Blaxit movement. They had a rally at the White House. They're out there, and I think that Black people are leaving the left, and I think that that's also a quiet movement, because just like my fellow, my Jews, they don't want to. They have to speak quietly in their community, because it's such a divergent thing. But these are social movements, and I think they are starting to happen. I just hope they happen in time. I think that if all things go well between now and election day, and momentum takes its course, and if Trump keeps his mouth shut, then I think that could make a big difference.
Well, see, I'm looking forward to the show we do. Maybe that Wednesday after the election, although who knows if it'll be.
Oh man, it'll be, yeah. I mean, it'll be so beautiful if he does it. Oh my.
Why don't we leave? Yeah, we can leave on a good note here.
Yes. Anyways, yeah, because I got to get ready to talk about my book, not to get into shameless plug here.
Yeah, well, you need this. Well, wow. Okay. God is a creator and lawgiver. Well, there you go.
Available at Amazon, available at all major. It's going to be available in bookstores. Probably if you request it, it'll get there. And if you don't want to pay for it, which is fine, you could ask your library; they'll carry it. Anyway, and I'm looking forward to interviews on that. So
good,
Mike. What is your latest article?
Okay, the latest column is on masks. Some very good data, which essentially shows that they do some good, and the closest thing to what I'd call a controlled experiment was in your very health system here, Mass General, the name of it escapes me, it's Mass General something.
Right.
There was before and after in several facilities, and wearing the mask made a difference.
Okay, good.
There was also animal studies where the hamsters were divided by a screen made of mask material, and they saw positive effects that way. So
good. Yeah, Mass General is very cutting edge.
Yeah.
So, all right, Mike, listen, I want to thank you as always for joining me. Michael D. Shaw. We do it every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So